Welcome to the Sisterhood of Sweat. I am here today with Brenden Kumarasamy. Brenden is the founder of MasterTalk. He coaches ambitious executives and entrepreneurs to become top 1% communicators in their industry. He also has a popular YouTube channel called MasterTalk, with the goal of providing free access to communication tools for everyone in the world. Today, we talked about 3 daily exercises you can do to help master your communication, master a presentation you're going to give, or master a talk on the stage. We talked all about the drills, how important it is to just practice, that practice makes perfect, that your 100th time is not like your 1,000th time of doing things. And it's all about just starting. We also talked about being a visionary. How would you speak like Martin Luther King, speaking about the dreams that you have? What visionary would you like to emulate? Or is there somebody sort of like a Gary Vee that you would like to emulate? Think about what it is you want to convey. And Brenden really brought home how important it is to not let fear win, but let your message win in the end, that your message is the most important thing that you have to deliver. It was so good today. Brenden had so many tips: how to get over the fears, how to get over the jitters, how to get out of your own way. Make sure to tune into this. You're going to want to put this on repeat. It was so good. And he also has an amazing YouTube channel where you can get all kinds of tips on conveying your message. I want to do public speaking, and I thought it was excellent for that as well. So without further ado, let's dive into this message with Brenden. I'm excited to welcome Brenden Kumarasamy to the Sisterhood of Sweat today. Welcome.
Linda, the pleasure's mine. Thanks for having me.
Well, you guys, we are going to be talking about talking. No, we're going to talk about speaking, which is something that can be worse than the fear of death for some people, public speaking. And I am going to find out today how to do it, how to get out of your own way, how to get over fear, and some tricks and tools of the trade. And Brenden, I was just so amazed when I was looking at your YouTube videos. How did you get started putting these little clips, together to help people learn how to public speak?
For sure, Linda. So it all started when I was in college. I went to business school, and I literally did the opposite of what you would expect a communication professional to be doing with their life, which was a bachelor's degree in accounting. So that's what I studied because I thought I was going to be a numbers guy for the rest of my life. And I stumbled upon these competitions, Linda, called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while other guys my age were playing like football or rugby or baseball, I wasn't one of those guys. I did presentations competitively. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, Linda, I started coaching a lot of the students in colleges, mostly to help them win those competitions. And that's what accidentally, big word on accident, made me really good at communication coaching. So then I looked at the state of the world when I was probably like 22 or something, and I looked at the YouTube videos that were out and about in the world, and I realized there wasn't a lot on the topic of public speaking communication that were available for free. So I just started making videos on a whim, and I called it Master Talk, and here we are a few years later.
That's awesome. So the Master Talk, uh, let's say, I am speaking at Triad Theater. I've got to have a keynote presentation. Woo! How do you help somebody? See, the biggest thing that I find is, first of all, imposter syndrome kicks in. And then you can kind of get stuck in that a little when you're thinking about it. But also, I have so many things I could talk about. How do I pick just one?
Absolutely. So here's a good way of thinking about this, Linda. Because you're right, different communication professionals has very different perspectives on how to approach this. So I bring more of a systematic approach because my goal, to your point, is to make this as easy as possible for people, even for people listening to this who have no interest in being on a stage. I think mastering communication applies for all of us. It's those little pieces because it helps us lead a more fulfilling life. It's the way that we raise our families, it's the way that we raise our children, it's the way that we make new friends. It's every facet of our life. So if we become better communicators, we'll just lead a better life. So how does that play into the frame? Similar to going to the gym, it's a lot easier for somebody to say, are we walking 15 minutes a day versus calorie counting on the first day at the gym, right? It's a lot easier for us to do those little things, right? Makes sense.
Totally.
So now how does that apply to communication? Communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time, Linda. So one of those balls is body language, one of them is storytelling, one of them is eye contact, one of them is making sure we don't go whenever we speak. There's so many different things. But if we try doing all of it at once, kind of like in a workout, if you try and do a strength training, cardiovascular, endurance, you're doing all of it, you just get overwhelmed. So for me, the question now becomes, what are the three easiest balls to juggle in communication? Because if we can juggle those three, we'll become much better. So let me start with ball number one. I'll throw it back to you, which is the random word exercise. Pick a random word like light bulb, like surface, like wife, like brick, like gate, and create random presentations out of thin air. So you pick a word, give a 60-second presentation. And this serves two purposes. One, it helps you deal with uncertainty because life is filled with it. And if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything.
So this is you have three basic exercises you have people do to master their talk. What, and to practice on a daily basis. What are the other two?
Absolutely. I just didn't want to monologue for 15 minutes, that's why I paused after the first one. But yes, you're absolutely right. So the random word exercise is the first one. That's similar in the gym business to saying, are we walking consistently every day? Are we doing one small workout every day to build our momentum? That's what that looks like. Exercise number two, Linda, is called the question drill. We get asked questions all the time in our life, at school, at work, in our businesses, in our families, but most of us are reactive to those questions, meaning the question comes up and we go, I don't really think about that. Let me answer that. I'll give you an example with me. A few years ago, I sucked, and I'm still not the best, at podcast guesting. So bad. I remember some guy asked me, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at him, Linda, and I said, I don't know, man. Toronto, New York, maybe it's Florida. Like, I don't know where this thing comes from. Right. So I was bad, clearly. So what did I do differently? Every single day for 5 minutes, Linda, that's all I ask your audience to think about. I answered one question that I thought the world would ask me about my expertise, my products, or my services. But if you do that,
That's good.
there you go, right? And that applies for podcast guesting too, right? A question, I'm sure you get on a lot of shows as well. So one
Yeah.
question that you get asked, and then you write them down. But if you do that once a day for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions about the business and about your expertise. You'll be bulletproof. That's number two.
Oh, that's very, very good. I'm really now curious as to what number three is.
Absolutely. I got a bunch more, so we're just getting started here.
I know, because these are not the ones I watched on the video. So I'm like, okay.
Yeah, because with MasterTalk, the YouTube channel, the tips are all there, but they're all around the place. Because it's kind of more like an encyclopedia, whereas on a podcast, I'm able to structure everything in the right
I
order.
love
So
it.
yeah,
Yes.
so it's
Well,
a lot.
you're talking a little bit longer when you're on a podcast and you have a huge listening audience. So it's going to be diverse. It's not going to be like maybe you gear your channel towards one audience, but now you're talking to a larger audience.
1000%. Which brings us to ball number three. It's so simple, Linda. We all know the tip, but we just don't do it, which is taking out your camera and sending the people that you love, the best clients at the gym, the best clients in your business, your best friends, a 20-second video message just showing your appreciation for them. And we don't want to overthink the video. It literally sounds something like this. Hey, Linda, I really appreciate all the impact that you're creating in the world. Thanks so much for doing this podcast. And I also love your courage to go speak at the theater in June, July. Best of luck with the speech. Super simple, but it's so simple, nobody does it. So for me, the question my coach always challenges me to think about is never ask yourself, do I know this? Instead, ask yourself, am I implementing this? And that's really the key. Just last December, I bought a stupid Santa hat on. I put it on my head and I DM'd the top 70 or 75 clients in my ecosystem and I sent them all 20-second videos and it took me hours. Yet it was worth it because it made their day. And these video messages teach us a really valuable lesson of what communication is for, Linda, which is to create
Connection.
joy. Exactly. Connection. So yeah, I rest my case there.
So good. And the one thing I was resistant against when I took for my business, I did the client cure. And well, she wanted me to do what? Videos and send them off, and also email letters, instead of having my assistant do it. And I don't know why I was resistant, because as soon as I did it, first of all, as soon as I did the email letter, I had people saying, "Oh, I really liked your letter. That was really good." And you're like, "Oh, okay." Like nobody ever pays attention to the other ones, because why? They're probably generic. And then my business coach was wanting me to do video, not just me with a guest like today, because it took me forever to decide I was doing solo rounds. She's like, "No, I want to see those. I want you to actually put those out there and do more of that." And as soon as I did that, I got DM'd by somebody I highly admire, and she was going on about it, and she said it gave her courage then to do the same thing. So I think when you're telling us to do video, it's kind of scary for people. How can they get so they're not so worried about, so hung up on what will somebody think about it? I feel stupid, because I did feel stupid at just talking to thin air, like nobody, like I'm talking to you right now, but like I was just talking to the camera. It felt so awkward.
You know what I love about you the most, Linda, is despite how successful you are, you're always very vulnerable in your shares. And I think that's why so many people resonate with your message. That's a side note there. And I think you embody that, which is let's start building the momentum. So my first ball is never the video message. Ball number one is, can you do the random word exercise alone in your basement? And then after that, it's, can you do the random word exercise if you have kids running around in your house, for those who are listening, or yourself, can you do that with them or your significant other or to the people around you? The shower, right? Somewhere. And then after you do this 50, 75 times, which doesn't take a long time, by the way, because it takes a minute to do it once. So 5 minutes a day for 3 weeks, you'll have done it 100 times. That's how quick this thing moves. So once we do that, we start to go, huh, I'm actually pretty good at this. This is not bad. Right. Then we go to the question drill. So the first question, you're like, oh my God, I don't know the answer to this. Kind of like the joke I was telling you earlier about how I didn't know where the fear of communication came from. But now somebody asked me the question, I obviously have a better answer, but that came from trial and error. And that builds up our confidence again. Next to the video message, I want to be super clear here with the team. It's not about posting on social media. I'm not even going there yet. It's about just sharing with the people you already love in a private fashion. So I'll give you a fun one I force my clients to do. Yes, I do use the word force because at that point you're paying for the accountability, right? So for them, it's not just about sending videos, it's having their children as well send videos to their uncles and their aunties because that's how they learn the lesson. I'll give you an example. Let's say a typical client is 40 years old, has a 10-year-old son. Okay, let's roll with that. So the 10-year-old son sends a video message, let's say one of their uncles, or their aunties, but their auntie responds with, Oh my God. I've never received a video message where this really made my day. Jason, you're doing so well. And it really encourages the kid. But as the parent, you look at that and you say, wow, Jason didn't have to be perfect. He just woke up and sent a video and it made their day. And why can't I do that with the people I serve? Especially for business owners listening to this. We need to remind ourselves that we are famous to people. We just aren't famous to the world, but we're definitely famous to our clients, and they love to hear from us.
That's such a good point. And that you don't have to know everything, right? It's really more about showing up, and you do want to try to provide some value. I just think your clients just want to know that you care, and like showing up perfectly. I was listening to Ed Milet today, and he was talking to Amy Porterfield on his podcast, and he was saying the social media posts that get the most likes are the ones where his hair is a mess, he looks like he just rolled out of bed, not the ones where he had the perfect photo shoot. And Amy was agreeing with that. So I find that interesting. But why do you think that is?
I think that is because people are craving realness. I think in an era where there's a lot of projection. Okay, this is my perfect life. At some point it becomes really negative on somebody because you're constantly comparing yourself to other people. Whereas when somebody like an Ed Milet or an Amy Porterfield or a figure of that level of success shows themselves like kind of in a bed struggling, it creates a vulnerability, a relatability factor, and goes, oh, they're just human beings. Like I could achieve the same level of success as them. So you feel that heart to heart connection. And the same rule applies for video messages. It's because you're making mistakes in the video that actually makes the video better to them because they know it's real. They know it's not curated. They know it's not perfect. So it gives them permission to not be perfect. And I know we haven't talked about my story, so I'll plug that in here as well. Like I was a child when I started MasterTalk, Linda. I was like 22 years old. I had no money. I started making videos on my mother's
You still
couch.
look like you're 22 years old.
Yeah, I'm a little bit older now. I'm like 26 now, so I'm a little bit more mature.
Okay. You're
And
a baby.
yeah. And by the way, and I say this to help people because I do very well in the business now. I coach a lot of CEOs, but the reason I tell you that is because I still live in my mom's basement, and they all know that, and they don't care. I do it mostly to spend time with my mother now. It's not for financial reasons anymore. But the point is I had every excuse not to open the camera. Right, I have a crooked left arm because of a surgery I had when I was younger. I grew up in Montreal, which is a city where you need to speak French, and I didn't know the language, which means I spent my whole life presenting in a language I didn't even know. Right? And despite all those challenges, and on top of that, you would think a communication expert studied comms. I got a bachelor's degree in accounting. Like, I'm literally the opposite of what you would expect somebody to take on this role. So the more important question now becomes, why did I do it? I did it because of the 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach. What are we doing for her? Yeah, sure, there could be a PhD guy who's like 55 years old in communication. That 7-year-old girl isn't related to that guy. So it's either I make the videos or nobody does. And that's what gave me the fuel to actually make this happen.
I love that. I love that so much. And our why is like our driving force. I think it's really important to know your why. Now, back to my first question I asked, when you are going to give a talk, it could just be your family. I mean, it could be, but let's say that you're really going to stand up in front of people and give a presentation. How do you, what are the factors that helps a person as far as knocking it out of the park? Like, what do you see? And when you did all these speaking competitions, and you helped coach people, what were the key factors that they need to focus on or possess to get their talk to land?
For sure, Linda. And there's a lot of different components there. So before we jump into that, I want to make sure everyone's implementing. So if you're listening to this episode right now and you have not already booked 15 minutes in your calendar every day to do the random word exercise, to do the question drill, and to send video messages, you are missing the point of today's conversation, which is it's not about doing the extraordinary thing. Like Alex Hormozy said, it's about doing the ordinary thing for an extraordinarily long period of time. So always ask yourself as you're listening to this, because if you're not doing those three things, you won't implement my super sophisticated talk framework on how to master talk. So remember, every day, book that time in. So with that said, let's dive into this. So let's start with the most basic thing, which is ball number 5 in my framework. And the strategy is called puzzle, Linda. So communication is kind of like jigsaw puzzles. You know those toys we used to play as kids? Like you got 500 pieces, kind of put it together in a puzzle. The question we need to ask ourselves now is when we work on a puzzle, which pieces do we start with first? And
Oh
the
my
answer
gosh,
is, oh, you
thank
know it.
you.
Oh, do you know it? Go ahead, jump in.
No, I'm just saying thank you.
Right.
That's where I'm at. Which piece do I start with first?
Absolutely. So I'll guide you through this. We'll have your talk ready by the end of today's conversation, right? So the answer is the corner pieces. And the reason is because the edges are easier to find in that box, Linda, because they got those little edges to them. So you build the edges out, then you work your way into the middle. That's how we build the puzzle. So why am I bringing that up? Because in speech building, in communication, in presentations, unfortunately, my friend, we do the opposite. We start with the middle first. We shove a bunch of content. We get to the presentation, and it sounds something like this. Yeah, so hi everyone, and then we get to the last slide. It's like, yeah, thanks. That's how it usually goes, most presentations. But there's an easy way to fix this. Practice and prepare your speeches like a jigsaw puzzle. Start with the edges first. Just practice the introduction 25 times. That's it. Just the intro. 25 seems like a big number, Linda. It really isn't, because your introduction's like a minute or two. So it'll take you like 30 minutes, 40 minutes to do that. Then go to the conclusion. What's a great movie with a terrible ending? Last time I checked, terrible movie. Same thing with the close. Practice the conclusion 25
Yeah,
times.
that's very important because
Right.
you're giving a first impression and a lasting impression, right?
Exactly. And then tackle the middle. And I'm more than happy to expand on how you build that. But really, that's the key. Because most people, whenever they're building a speech like you are, the mistake they make is they'll craft, let's say, a 30-minute talk. Then they'll present the whole talk, let's say 4 or 5 times. And then they get really tired. Like, oh my God, I'm not seeing any improvement. Let me go eat a sandwich. And then they don't practice anymore.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Okay. So practice makes perfect. Now, do you believe in scripted, or do you think an outline is better?
Great question. So here's what I think. I'm not really in a camp. I would say for me, what's made the most sense is doing what you're the most comfortable with, but ultimately doing it without either. What do I mean by this? So what I mean is at the beginning, if you're comfortable scripting your speech, that's something you want to do, definitely script it, but don't make that the final talk. So you start by scripting, let's say the intro, then you'll practice the intro. You'll script the bottom, the conclusion, and then you'll practice it. But eventually you'll get to a point where you don't need the paper anymore. And then the outline is a lot more useful, I would say, for the middle. So a good way of summarizing these thoughts, I would script the top and the bottom, so the beginning and the ending. So that's really clean from the get-go and it's easy to get right.
Yeah.
But the middle, I would more trend towards outlining the speech versus scripting it. So here's the way you do this. Start with the key idea. There's only one thing people should take away from this whole conversation. What do you want it to be? Or the keynote? So for me, it's really simple. I just want people to believe at the end of this conversation, Linda, that they could be a great speaker too. That's it. That's all. So when people are listening to this, and this is strategic from my part, they don't feel overwhelmed. So notice how people are listening, and you actually gave me a lot of great cues that I'm not doing so bad here. Where you're going, oh, like the random word exercise is pretty easy. Like that's not bad. I could do that. Like, oh, I could do that with my kid or something. Question drills, oh, I could just sit down and just listen to an episode and do questions. Video messages, okay, it takes like 20 seconds. Like this is not rocket science because I'm making it feel like it's not rocket science. So that's one piece. So when we have our key idea, the last part of the framework is what I call three to defend. So three to defend just means what are three ideas that you can share in your presentation? Could be a story, an analogy, a quote, a statistic, it doesn't matter, that you feel proves out the thesis. So for me, it's always
Okay.
yeah. So for me, it's always the personal story, my struggles that we talked about. It's always practical tips that are easy as butter to implement. And the third piece is helping them imagine a world where they implement the strategies.
Say the three again.
Of course, happy to. You're such a great listener, by the way. So the first piece is really the personal story, right? So it's all about going, okay, this is my struggles. I was so bad at this. If I could do it, you could do it. Yeah, so that's the first piece. The second piece is practical tips. So notice how in this entire podcast, I'm sharing a lot of easy tips. So like the random word exercise, the video message. So you go to yourself, huh, like I could probably get everyone in my gym to do this too, or like the people around me, right? It's not hard. You can get like a 7-year-old to do this. And that inspires us to do it more. And then the third piece is helping them imagine a world in which, if they get to the other side, what that looks like. I'll give you a simple example that I'm sure you're an expert in, that you talk a lot about in this podcast, which is what happens if you do get your dream body? What happens if you do get the result that you want in your life? So instead of focusing on the starting point, the jet fuel or the seat that you're on in the flight, you're focusing on the destination. Hawaii. What does that look like in your life? And that's what pushes us. So for me, it's about saying, how would your life change if you became an exceptional communicator? How much more lives would you be able to impact? How many more ideas would you be able to share? And instigating that, creating that feeling of, oh my God, if I just did the random word exercise every day, my whole life would change, which is actually true for a lot of us. Then it creates the transformation. So those are my three.
So there was a method to my coach's madness at a bikini competition when my question was, how would you live in a bikini competition? We're asked a question when we're tied. How would you live your life in a yellow submarine? And then you have to turn it around to talk about what you actually want to talk about. So that's kind of a random word exercise in itself, because you're thrown some weird question and then you have to flip it to talk about what it was you wanted to say to begin with. And I think the exercises are ideal. Now, I do think some people will still, even though they practice, they're going to get those jitters, those butterflies. What are some practical tips to help with that?
For sure, Linda. Here's the way I think about it. The jitters won't go away. If I'm being perfectly honest, I don't think there's a single person in the world, unless they're like a sociopath or something, that doesn't feel any amount of jitters. It's just a different level. So I don't feel jitters anymore, let's say when I'm on a podcast, because I've done so many, but I
Right.
definitely felt the jitters at the beginning. Like my first 20, my first 25 appearances. Oh my God, like my thought was, why would anyone want to have me on their show? Like to do what? Like what am I supposed to do? Right? So that I always had that. But today the level sounds more like, let's say me and you're having lunch and Elon Musk calls me and he goes, "Hey, I really liked your episode with Linda on her podcast. I like your YouTube channel. Can you coach me? I'll pay you $3 million." Yeah, that would stress me out. That would cause me a lot of anxiety. So the fear is there. It's just at
You
different
know,
levels.
Elon's going to call you tomorrow now,
You never know. Who knows?
right?
But I think either way I'd definitely be stressed, right? But I think the key here, Linda, is we need to realize, and I'll give you an analogy to explain this, is communication and public speaking fear is not something we should try to remove entirely, but rather a relationship we need to learn to manage. Kind of like a marriage. We need to learn to dance with it. So the analogy I always draw is the boxing match analogy, where one side of the ring is the fear and the other side of the ring is the message. So the fear is exactly what we talked about. The fears, the jitters, the stress, the anxiety. I don't want to do this. Ugh, why should I? And the other side of the ring is the message. Why am I giving this presentation? And it doesn't need to be the next Elon Musk here. It doesn't need to be the next Oprah Winfrey. It could be I want to be a better role model for my children. It could be I want to be a better role model for my community. I want to influence people at my company. It doesn't have to be this massive thing. But the key here is not to leave the fear, but rather make sure that when that boxing match starts and both meet in the middle, that your message gets the knockout punch, that your message wins the match every single day of the week. Every day I wanted to quit MasterTalk. I thought it was stupid. I mean, think about it. I was a 22-year-old kid making videos in my mom's basement with a phone and no money and no degree or credibility. Why did I keep going? Because I know that 7-year-old girl, Linda. I coached them. And I feel the stress and anxiety that they have, and I say, I can alleviate that. So I got some fear, but I might as well crush it with the message and make it work.
So my last guest talked about FTT. Are you familiar with that?
Could you just remind? I think I've heard of it, but I forgot.
Okay, so Brene Brown talks about it in her book, but it's your effing first time. So basically, you're going to have your first time. And I think it's just realizing like it isn't going to be like your 20th time or your 100th time, and you're going to get better and better. Like when I had the vice president of Steve Harvey operations on my show, I was nervous and I was new. I hadn't been doing this very long, and I knocked over a glass of water, just about fried my complete keyboard. And that was the first time. Then when I had her on again, she's still my top episode, and I was so comfortable, so relaxed, no problem. And I would just even then say, when I did Bold TV the first time, I had a sound check. Everything was perfect. I was ready in advance. I made all of my healthy holiday treats. They were, and I was going to relax for an hour because she was going to be back. And my iPad it was not charging, and there was something wrong. It was new. It didn't even make sense because I just got it. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So I had to shoot on a little tiny iPhone. Thank goodness I had a tripod. I felt like Lucille Ball in the Chocolate Factory because I was like, I made like 4 different things on the air, and it was going so fast, and I was trying to show it all. And, but it got a lot of hits. It did well. Now, what I said to myself was, the next time I'm going to crush it. I'm going to be doubly prepared. I'm going to have extra charging cords, this, that, and the other thing. And so I think just realizing it's your FTT could help.
Wow, I learned that. I didn't know that actually. That's really good.
Right? So it's like, you can't expect to be where Les Brown is your very first time speaking.
Absolutely. That's why I think it's important. Another way of explaining that, but I think your version of it is much better than mine or Brené's version of it, which is simply like figure out who you want to be, who already has what you want, your goals, your dreams, but also spend the time. That's why I always say never say wow, always ask how. So never say wow, always ask how means whenever you see someone you admire that you want to become, don't just go, "Oh my God, this person's so amazing." That's great. Like compliment them, give them their flowers,
I
but then
probably do a little bit of that.
okay, and that's okay, right? That's totally fine because you said the keyword, a little bit of that. But then the other piece is going, how did they actually get there? It's like Les, right? So a lot of us will look at Les Brown or Tony Robbins or Brene Brown or go, "Oh my God, like this person's amazing," but they don't look at their first speeches. They don't go, how did Les actually start? How many times has he delivered a presentation? And the answer is probably more than 100. It's probably more than 1,000. So that just gives you an idea. Say, oh, That's the key. I did the same thing with the YouTube channel. Even if I had a
Mhm.
ton of insecurity around it, I looked at like a Marcus Brownlee who has like 10, 15 million subscribers, and I went to watch his first videos and he keeps them all up. He's like this 16-year-old kid in like a basement working with this tech gear, and he has like one of the most successful technology channels in the world now on YouTube. So I said, wait a second, if I just make 500 of these, I'll probably be really good at speaking. And it turned out that was just the right approach. That's it. Simple.
And I remember Lewis Howes. I got to sit in the front row to receive the message, how to overcome the fear of public speaking. That's a whole nother story why I was even there. But here I am. I'm sitting there for the message, and he's talking about his very first time at Toastmasters. He's got the injury. He's got his arm in a cast, and it's like this. And he's like, he looks down, he reads off his paper, then he gets feedback, and they're like, smile more. So he comes back again. Hi, my name is Lewis House. And then he looks back down at his paper. And this is how he started. So, like, just really, did that help? Yes, it helped so much. And then he spoke a lot about all of the reasons why we have the fear. It's the fear of people's judgment. It's like you could have fear of success, like that you're going to lose people if you start becoming this famous speaker. You could have all kinds of different fears. But I love your take and analogy where you said, don't let the fear win, let the message come out on top. And I think that could really help a lot of people. It's like if you focus on your fear, then you can't focus fully on your message. So you have to choose.
I completely agree, and I'm definitely a big fan of Lewis's as well. So great to see his work as well.
Yeah, so good, so good. So how do we craft a message? Because I am so about talking about your dreams, and I absolutely love, I looked at I didn't get to watch it, but I love Martin Luther King. I have a dream. I love listening to that. How do we craft a message like that?
Right. So that's really the topic of visionary communication. How do we communicate in a way, Linda, that gets other people to want to follow us? So there's a few specific areas that we can drive here. But once again, I always like to emphasize, if we're not doing the stuff we talked about earlier in this conversation, we cannot speak like a visionary. Okay, we can't do that. It's like a step. It's like trying to deadlift like a 300 pound. If we're not already practicing the beginning steps, we can't really get there. So it's the same thing. So here's what visionaries do in a nutshell, Linda. Whether it's MLK, whether it's Steve Jobs, Elon, or a lot of the good ones that are great communicators as well. Elon definitely not being one of them in the speaking realm, is their ability to communicate the past and the future in parallel. So I'll give you an example. So when Steve Jobs is communicating when he first introduced the iPhone, which is an incredible speech, he didn't just talk about the iPhone. He talked about what we are using right now, the past. So for example, why do we need to all use Blackberries? The tactile keyboard is taking up half of the screen. We need a better solution. So what the visionary is doing is they're helping the audience who do not understand or comprehend the future that the visionary envisions. So they use the terms of today. This is what you're currently using, and this is why this is wrong. So MLK is another great example of that, where he says the current society that we live in today is XYZ. They discriminate you based on the color of your skin rather than the content of your character. Right? That's one of his lines in I Have a Dream. So he paints that morbid reality of how society
Mm,
is, and then
mhm,
shows I don't want to live in that world because I
mm,
have a dream that all of my four children grow up, and then he
Chills.
right,
Mm-hmm.
and then he goes into that visionary piece. One thing I do with the best clients in my ecosystem that I'll recommend, but not really until you've done the beginner stuff, is I actually force them to recite MLK's speech as if they were them, as if they were him. And that forces you to put your shoes in the visionary. So, for example, with the Steve Jobs speech, I'll take out the transcript, or a Tony Robbins, I'll take out the transcript, go to one of my clients and go, now you need to present it as if you're Tony, as if you're Mel Robbins, as if you're Brene Brown. And what this does, it changes the identity. You're getting me really excited now because I don't get this question a lot. You really step into the visionary as if you were them. So what happens is you're creating normality in your mind. So after you've presented like 10 visionary speeches, eventually you just go, oh, I'm just one of those people. And the shift is insane. So then when you start communicating your vision of what exists today versus what exists in the future, what you want to create, you do it with the same conviction that all of them have done in the past.
So thank you, Brenden, because while we're sitting there, I just watched Rachel Hollis like a few weeks ago, and she was talking about getting this word about who she was. I can't remember now if it was self-help guru. It was some kind of something like that. I'm a that. That's me. That's who I am. And like, this is before she ever became famous, popular, wrote her books. She's sitting in a self-development conference and she got that word. And when you said that word, I am a visionary, and I've been told that, but like somehow it just all really clicked within, because I when I listened to that 2 weeks ago, I thought, oh well, what is my word? Who am I? Like, what am I? No, you know what I mean? Like, I know that I do health and fitness. I know I speak on a podcast. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I'm, all these things. I wear a lot of hats. Today I have a blue one on. So, but just to get a sense, I think it's so important when you speak to know what you're speaking in and who you truly are, so you can deliver the message. So today you just really brought that home for me. So I thank you for that.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
And I bet a lot of people listening are identifying with our talk. You're either thinking you're a visionary, or you might think, wow, Brenden started from just deciding to do these speaking competitions, and then he started coaching others, and now he has a channel and he's on all these podcasts, and just realize and see the pattern of there's always a beginning. And again, your 100th time isn't going to look like your 1,000th time.
Exactly. And just to add more granularity, it was all an accident. Like the only reason I did these speech competitions was to get a job. Like I wasn't looking to be this, oh, one day I'm going to be the grandmaster of communication or be on podcasts or even be a thought leader. Then that led to getting my job, which is what I wanted to do. I was super allergic to entrepreneurship because nobody in my family has ever been a successful entrepreneur. And then I just had the idea on a whim. I was just making videos for fun. I never thought it'd be a business, and things just took a turn. So you don't need to have all the answers. Those who are listening to this, you just need to be willing to start. That's why I love Zig Ziglar's quote. He always says that you don't need to be great to start, but you do have to start to be great. And I feel that perspective is really important for all of us looking to follow our dreams.
Yeah, and when I think back to all of the things that have led me to this moment, they all had a start. And I almost want to do a podcast just on that with pictures, like, because it would just be so eye-opening to people where you start dreaming as, I don't know, I was probably 21 or 22. I already had two small children, and I
Wow.
was in North Dakota on an Air Force base, and I was watching Joni Greggins. She was funny, by the way. She was the Good Morning America host for fitness. And I thought, I'd like to do that someday. Maybe if I practice, I'll be able to do that. So that was then, and this is now. And it's I did a sequel. I wrote Fat Flush for Life with New York Times bestselling author Anne Louise Gittleman, which was a sequel to Joni Greggins' book. And so I could just say like these things that you speak out, that you wish, that you follow up with your dreams, because our time's going to pass anyway. You could be sitting there thinking about it, or you could take messy action and just do it like the rest of us. And then your story will be like my story. I started just thinking, I wish I could do that. And I started practicing. And then now I own my own gym, community, with Sisterhood of Sweat. I've written books. I got to be on the cover of a magazine at 60. Hey, it's just endless what you could accomplish when you choose to follow your dreams instead of think about them.
Am I the only one on the show who can't believe that you're 60? Like, what in the world? What?
I'm so not mature. No, I'm just kidding.
I was like 60. I thought you were gonna say cover a magazine at like 45 or 40 or
Yeah.
something.
So, but it's just following after your dreams and keeps you young and vibrant and alive and excited. And that's the difference. You don't have to, we all are getting older every day. But I think the difference is not just hanging it up and saying, oh, I've reached a certain age, so I can't follow my dreams anymore.
Powerful. Very
Right?
powerful.
So
Bec
powerful.
because you'll make an excuse at any age. Like if you're in your 20s, you say you're too young. If you're in your 30s, you go, well, I just got married, I just had kids, I got a mortgage. Then you're in your 40s and you're like, well, I still got to pay it off. And things, and then my kids, I got to pay for college, I got to save it. Oh, I'm in my 50s, I guess time is running out, I'm about to retire, do I really need to do this? And then your 60s, you go, yeah, well, I guess I'm retired. So there's always an excuse at every level versus the question that I love: are we making an excuse to do the thing or not do the thing? That by Beryl Solomon, and I always apply that in my life.
I love that. And also yesterday was kind of a fun day. My son, who is 40, he gave me like we were talking because I was just like, sometimes I do too much, okay? Take on too much, do too much. And we were talking and he said, oh, sometimes you just have to take a new direction. And I love that because in life, you could get to the end of something that you're doing. It doesn't mean you quit. It means maybe you need to take a new perspective on what you're doing. Maybe you need to do like a task analyzation of, what am I doing that no longer lights me up? What am I doing that isn't filling my cup, that really isn't serving anyone, that I don't want to do anymore? And look and see, how can I change this direction to something that I'm actually excited about? And so today I did take his advice and I already was like, oh my gosh, that was what I needed. So maybe today hearing this podcast is what you needed. And we would love to hear from you, love to hear what resonated with you that we talked about. And Brenden, I just have really enjoyed your freshness and your vibrance, your energy, your thought process, and how much work you have put into this. So I commend you on that because it really shows. And how can people reach you on social and you have something for them today so that they can take this lesson a little further?
For sure, Linda. The pleasure was absolutely mine. Thanks so much for your openness and having me on the show. Such a pleasure. So, two ways to keep in touch. The first one is to attend one of my free communication trainings. I do a free one every 2 weeks that's live over Zoom. So you can see me applying the tips that we teach today, but me actually doing them. So you get a new level of learning, and they're absolutely free. So if you want to jump on that, go to rockstarcommunicator.com. And then the second way to keep in touch is the YouTube channel. You can just go to MasterTalk in one word, and you'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak.
And also, I know I'm going to get asked this. Do you coach people one-on-one or is it always in a group?
Yeah, my one-on-one is a little dangerous now, the pricing. So I would say most of the work today is in groups. Yeah, small groups though, 10 to 15
Right,
people.
right, right, right. And do they people practice their talk in front of you and you give them feedback and things like that?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yes, so good. You guys have to check out Brendan's YouTube channel. the name of that again?
Yeah, MasterTalk.
And like, really, if you want to learn how to communicate better, I mean, it was very entertaining, fun to listen to, and you'll have takeaways automatically as soon as you listen and subscribe to that channel. So I just wanted to give you a little plug for that because I really thought it was great how you put that together.
Thanks so much, Linda. It's such a pleasure.
And thanks everybody for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Sweat. And as always, keep on keeping on, everybody.